Welcome to the CG Pro podcast. This is a brand new episode today. We've got Wolfie. I will introduce in just a second. Feel free to like and subscribe and follow us on becomecgpro.com. But yeah, today, very pleased to welcome Wolfie. Been really looking forward to this conversation. And Wolfie is a good friend, also works with us in a teaching capacity. But Wolfie's a very talented DP, has come up through the ranks in the world of filmmaking. Has worked with some amazing people from Michel Gaundry, Spike Jonze, and done a lot of different types of work, lots of features, including Iron Man 3 and all kinds of cool stuff. Interstellar, lots and lots of cool things to speak about there. But yeah, welcome, Wolfie. It's great to have you here.
Nice to be here. And yeah, some of those credits are me coming up through the ranks, doing set lighting and all of that. You know, my latest cinematographer credits are Mr. Spam Gets a New Hat by DNEG, which was a short film directed by William Joyce, Academy Award-winning short film director, and that was done in Unreal Engine, and I was a digital cinematographer on that. So that's one of the most recent projects I've done, and then a lot of stuff for demos for Moses, the capture company, and doing commercials for them and all that. So yeah, it's been a fun ride, you know.
Yeah, I've been really looking forward to this because you've really, as you said, come up through the ranks and really got to know filmmaking through lighting, which is an incredible way to understand how film is made and cinematography, particularly within that. But you now have this kind of unique perspective in virtual production because you're involved in it so much, and not many cinematographers yet have got to understand what that is, how it's useful. So I'm really excited to talk to you about that as we move forwards. But I'd love to hear a little bit about you've kind of touched on it a little bit already, but a little bit about your journey to this point and how you got into the industry and what kind of drove you, what inspired you to get into it. I think it's really a lot of our listeners I know are in the industry, but some people aren't, and some people are wanting to make changes. So I think it's always really inspiring to hear about how you did what you did and what influenced your decisions and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things about the focus being virtual production, it's I tell people virtual production, it's not rocket science, right? Because rocket science has a dedicated body of knowledge and people who will teach it to you easily accessible. So it's way easier to be a rocket scientist. like virtual
there's a well-trodden path to being a rocket scientist. Virtual production, not so much.
Yeah, exactly. And decades of institutional knowledge on how to make it happen. Yeah. It's a daunting task. I started out as a kid with computers, and I had a Commodore 64, had a VIC-20 before that, and my brothers, who were much older than I, were going to UNM, and they were doing computer science. So as a 10-year-old, my 18-year-old brothers, 20-year-old brothers were having access to online abilities, and we had a modem for my VIC-20. So I was actually like in hacker groups, and I was like online in like 1981, 1982. And then with the Commodore 64, I ran a hacker bulletin board for several years. And I got recruited as a white hat hacker into NASA. So I spent a summer breaking into NASA computers and got a little security clearance at 16 and all of that. So like so cool. I had this, it's neat, right? But I bring it up because at that time period, it was computer use groups. We were taking a piece of technology that wasn't necessarily purposed for what we were doing with it, and we were doing extraordinary things with it, right? We were under the hood. They made little video games. So the Commodore 64 had a special sound chip, but then phone freaks were able to exploit that sound chip to emulate operators, and we could take over trunk lines and make long distance phone calls. So, but it was all just friends helping friends in these little like web group, internet groups, calling in with a modem and chat rooms, right? But there was this air of like, wow, this is a daring adventure. This technology, we're totally brand new, and there's no roadmap. We're all just figuring it out and figuring out our hacks and sharing them with each other. And it was like, all in a spirit of knowledge and fun and exploration. And one of the things I love about virtual production is that's absolutely the environment. It reminds me, I feel very nostalgic working in virtual production because I feel like I'm 15 years old again. There's no roadmap. Your best friends are the smart dude that will share information with you and you share with them. And, everybody's just, hey, what are the aha moments? What were your takeaways from the last thing? It's very exciting and it's very engaged and it's very daunting, and you really, you only survive on the good graces of your friends,
Yeah.
like this is a very collaborative environment. And to work in virtual production, you're going to be meeting people far outside your normal realm of specialty. And that to me is always very exciting. I'm meeting people who know more about camera sensors than I've ever read or ever heard spoken of, working 26 years in cinematography and in lighting and on film sets. The conversations with the people I have now who are, manufacturers of the camera sensors, manufacturers of scientific cameras that are now having conversations that are cross-pollinating with virtual production, latency speeds and all sorts of like, color balancing issues, gray points, black points. Like I'm learning so much more as a cinematographer, having taken on virtual production. It's making me a better live action cinematographer. And I find the people and the conversations that I have very, very illuminating, very, very, very interesting, very smart people. This is not an adventure for the faint of heart or the weak of mind.
How did you get from hacker to filmmaker?
Yeah, it's funny, right? So I had this East Coast ticket to ride. I had a security clearance at 16. Being a computer security specialist back when people didn't even know what that was, and everybody's password was password. It was I worked in that office that summer, and I was like, this is terrible. I'm like, the office politics and the like going to the same little like, dingy box to live in for the rest of your life, and the types of conversations and like working with computers at that point, like I found really profoundly boring. Like what more interesting? Like I had peaked at 16. What else am I going to do? Right. Like, and they're really just abacus. So it's like, what is the application of the computer? I love technology anywhere I've gone in my life, but it's always been, what's the emotional experience that technology brings you, right? I'm fascinated by really cool tools, but they're pointless without application, right? So video walls, watching The Mandalorian and being like, how the hell did they do this on a TV budget? Like, oh, well, it's a Disney TV budget, first of all. But I was like, this is amazing work. Like the CG, I was just like, man, stuff's parallaxing. It's so believable and it's so good. And I'm like, I know how TV's shot, and like, they're on tight schedules. I'm like, there's some real interesting magic going on here, So that was like, seeing it in the field really was inspiring. You're like, wow, this is bringing worlds alive. And this is empowering filmmakers to be able to create better stories, in larger quantities. Some people are very much against technology helping out previously difficult tasks, right? Like when digital cameras came out, a whole slew of cinematographers are like, oh, this is garbage. Now you're just going to have more crap, and lesser talented people are able to use the tools. And I'm not one of those people. I very much want power to the people. I want YouTubers to look good. I want, $5 million features to look good. I want $100 million features to look good. I like that technology empowers artists, right? So I want people's creative vision to be done cheaper and easier. And that will empower more interesting stories at the far end of the bell curve to compete in the marketplace. Like the quality level has risen so that, indie filmmakers can make, a big blockbuster concept without necessarily, big budget name actors or that kind of thing, or you can do efficiencies where, you have a concept that uses one Unreal Engine set and you spend, $1 million making an incredible one set virtual thing. And then you just rock that for the whole feature, and it will look like a Marvel story. It'll just happen to be that the Marvel story will be all over the planet and on 20 different spaceships and a million different sets, whereas this story just stays inside its one narrow column, So, and I think that's one of the things that's coming down the pike with, Unreal Engine getting better and better. Unreal 4 is sort of like still production prototype. You have to really wrestle Unreal 4 to make it look super photorealistic and run cleanly and efficiently on a video wall. Whereas you see Unreal 5, the Lumen and the Metascans being more and more, prevalent, you can tell that the next version of Unreal is going to be really power to the people. I think where an average Unreal 4 user will be able to create for you, you need a really good Unreal Engine person to design an Unreal a virtual wall set. But the average Unreal user will be able to design a really photorealistic set with Unreal 5 and be able to light it with Lumen. Right now you don't have bounce cards, you don't have grip items in Unreal 4. Yeah, and to light it, you can make it look good, but you really need to know what you're doing with volumetrics. You need to do it with the atmosphere. You need to do, there's a lot to learn to make lighting look really good in Unreal 4. But I think in Unreal 5, where it automatically ray tracing, bounces start working. So when somebody adds a light, suddenly with the way it bounces around the set, it's just going to look much more real without having to understand how to fake making it look real,
Right. Yeah, which is the same as how offline visual effects evolved too. And there was lots of faking it initially as that technology came up, and there was no indirect lighting. There was all of that stuff, which is now being implemented in real time, has already kind of gone through that cycle in offline. But now the sort of magic that's happening is the fact that it can be run in real time, which is, to me, it's absolutely bonkers that that's even possible still. Even though I've been in the industry for a long time, it still just blows me away the fact that this is now possible. And yeah, I think we've only begun to explore what's possible. But you've had some really great experiences in the middle of the sort of genesis of this technology and method. It's not, like you said already, it's not necessarily that all of these things are brand new, but there's an evolution of a bunch of the pieces, some new, and then some techniques which are like an image being behind some action is something that goes back almost 100 years. But yeah, now we're in this position where we're able to put a camera in front of that and move it and have it make sense, and a bunch of other things as well. So, but you've been in a really interesting spot to be able to kind of jump in and really, hack, going back to your early days, maybe kind of hack your way through with the other people who are everybody's doing the same thing. I love the fact that it's been this great leveler. There's all of the people that have been around, been the gatekeepers of all of these environments for so long. Suddenly they're not anymore necessarily. They have to everybody has to kind of talk on the same level. It's brought a lot of kind of opportunity, I think, and humility back to the art form.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I got brought into a virtual production with during all my years coming up and gaffing and all of that, I did a ton of green screen work. I did like, titles for, Mission Impossible movies and Arnold Schwarzenegger movies, and did a lot of like green screen replacement on movies like Surf Girl, where we're, replacing faces. We're using skateboards underneath surfboards to like do replacements. So, I've been in the realm for a very long time, and I've seen what works, and I've seen what works with lighting, and I've watched the evolution of green screens being like 1995, where you're using a lavender net to get a quarter of a stop off of the green corner so it'll comp out. And now it's pretty much, you just blast it with light and you're like, yeah, it's fine. They'll comp it out. We had a job where Sarah Palin came in and she was supposed to be wearing blue jeans and flannel. So we had done a 270-degree green screen for this like super complex crane shot for this intro to her TV show. And she shows up and she's like, no, I want to wear my hunting outfit. And we're like, you mean the green on green
one
hunting? And we're like, we were just like, well, put her in there, let's see. And so they threw her up on the stage, and then the visual effects guy is like, yeah, the green's different enough, we can comp it out, no problem, have her do it. And that was the first time I had seen like that level of advancement in green screen technology, being able to extract subtleties. But
there's always a way, even if you're basically saying that you're going to roto this at the end, like at the end of the production. There's a story I remember hearing about I think it was I forget which movie and which director now, but somebody I think it was George Lucas saying, they were shooting in the rain and it was supposed to not be in the rain, and is saying, well, it's okay, we'll paint the rain out later, which is fine when you're on set as a decision to make flippantly, but then that ends up on some poor artist's desk one day, like, I have to do what? So there's always a sort of manual way out of those problems, I guess. But the power of all of this, like you were saying with Mandalorian and TV, the world of TV, the volume of material that you have to get through in that kind of world means that you can't do those kinds of things. Those fixes are only really the domain of high budget or feature type of thing. Whereas in this kind of in TV, especially where you're trying to get lots of volume out, or just do a feature and punch above your weight and have a whole feature length of material, but for a lower budget than maybe you would before. Like, it's a really interesting space, I think, because I think there's so much misconception about what virtual production is, and teaching it, I've tried to explain that it's lots of things and it's different bits of things that you can put together in different ways, but it isn't any one thing in particular. But do you have kind of like a philosophy on it, from or how you would describe it to say a client who's wanting to use it but not quite sure when and where and how?
Yeah. To me, virtual production is a toolbox of tools that can be employed in a lot of different ways, right? So the toolbox of tools is, you have, Unreal Engine, which allows you to do three-dimensional photorealistic sets at a reasonable price compared to other visual effects in the past, right? With smaller teams than you used to need to do those kind of sets. And then you have programs like, Moses, hardware solutions like Moses, which allow you to track a camera movement and tie that camera movement to a virtual camera so that the live action and the background all play together nicely. And it has to do with three-dimensional lighting. And so like, you can use the tools for a lot of different things. Like in the last year, we've had jobs come up like with Engine Room, where, we're getting asked to come up with a pitch for, companies like Walmart that are doing employee training. They're doing it on, 3D headsets, and they just want a three-dimensional rough illustration of the store, but being able to go over and show people how to stock shelves and have people, choose things. And then the other thing they did the training for was they would have you talk to an animatronic customer, but the animatronic customer was done with mocap. So when he's getting angry, the bone structure of this animatronic person that you're talking to is getting angry, like a customer that would be angry, right? And then it records your voice, and then it flips it around, and then you have to sit there as the customer looking at a wireframe of you with your recorded voice talking back to you. And it was an extraordinary training experience using Unreal Engine virtual production, because you're like, wow, oh, I sounded really inauthentic there, and oh, that was actually really truthful. You're like, oh, this is a really amazing, and there's a thing, so virtual production for employee training videos, right? And then the other job I had was my good friend David Prescott, who's the producer on Mr. Spam, works over at DNEG. He brought me in to help with the digital. He brought me on as the digital cinematographer for Mr. Spam, and they had David had put together an extraordinarily talented group of people. The artists, the lighting riggers, they were all very, very talented. A good chunk of them had come from 2D animation. And then David had realized we could really have some advancements in animation by using Unreal to do high-end, quality animation. And he was working very closely with Epic Games. We were breaking the engine on a daily basis, and Epic Games was incredibly engaged in helping us and helping develop the tools and listening to our feedback about where they need to go with other tools. And but a lot of the two-dimensional animators weren't used to being in a three-dimensional workspace. Now it's not about drawing the little sliver of light here. You have to know where to put that light. It's like it needs to go 3 feet back and 6 feet up. And okay, I need a light that's 20 feet wide and 400 feet long. And, I want 18K lights out every window, creating a harder backlight so we get a little more edge definition. And when I hadn't worked in the virtual space like that until, Mr. Spam. And that's where I came in, and I was like, David called me. He was like, hey, we want you to come in and do this. We think you're the guy. And I was like, I've not done animation lighting, but if you have a vision on that I can do it, I'm happy to show up and give it a run. And then when I got into it, we did the interview, and I started asking questions in the interview process when I was meeting the team. I was like, can we make the lights invisible? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, oh, that's good. And I was like, can I design any light I want, any shape or size? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, I can have full control over the colors. I can, have filtrations. Well, we don't have filtrations yet, but we can adjust qualities. I was like, okay. And it was like, we don't have bounce cards. Like, oh, you don't? I was like, all right, but we can make smaller lights that are softer. I was like, yeah, okay. And then oh, sometimes the reflectivity that you're trying to get out of a light, we will do that on the model, not on the light side. It's like, oh, that's interesting. And so in checking out, asking what my capabilities were, they realized pretty quick that I was going to be the right call. So we had a really great time working on that. I did a few lighting fixes. The lighting gaffer was so incredibly talented. That team did a lot of the heavy lifting before I even showed up to make a few final adjustments. And, there was 1 or 2 camera issues. There was a scene where the bad guys were introduced, but they had the lead character close to camera and they had the bad guys far away on a prime lens. So they looked really small. And I was like, we either need to switch to a telephoto lens to exaggerate the size of the bad guys, or we need to change the blocking in the camera over to here because he wants to look small in frame and we want these 3 thugs to dominate the frame. And that was a perfect example of where switching from traditional animation pipeline to virtual production pipeline. And animation, you got, one guy, one woman or guy is doing 3 seconds of animation for a year, right? And right. There's no changing a camera angle. There's no, switching lenses after you start. If you blow it in pre-production, it's in the movie and that's it. You've made the call. And here we could get into it, we could work it, and you're like, oh, you know what? We were watching it now. I'd like to make a note as a director. You want the director to be able to change blocking. You want the director to be able to redo a scene and re-render it with a little different emphasis. And we're doing subtle, delicate, emotional work with cameras and lights. And you need to be able to play, and the previous pipeline rewarded, playing your hits. Don't experiment, right? Like, it's too dangerous. Now with Unreal Engine, you can really play. You can try out something, you know? And then so that was animation, right? And then there's virtual production where we're doing the traditional Mandalorian three-dimensional wall parallaxing as you move and the camera's moving. So like those are three vastly different projects, an animated piece, a live action piece, an Oculus Rift 3D piece, but all of them are using virtual production. All of them are using Unreal Engine. All of them are using 3D lighting applied in a virtual space, a lot of times matching 3D lighting in meat space. So yeah, I find that fascinating. It's so modular,
With Unreal, talking about that for a second, you are obviously around and working in projects that are using Unreal Engine, but you've also used it directly, hands-on yourself. I know that you've been through the Unreal Fellowship, but you also, use it. Can you speak a little bit to how, as a cinematographer, in addition to working with a big project like a DNA project where they're using that, you may not be as hands-on with the engine in that kind of environment, but as a filmmaker, thinking about it from maybe the slightly more indie perspective, or just from your perspective, maybe trying experimenting with things, or how is Unreal useful to your process?
That was a really interesting. We had that conversation on Mr. Spam, right? It was like, hey, how much effort should I be putting into learning Unreal Engine? Should I be, logging in and using Unreal to help with the physical moving of the lights and all of that? In that instance, David and I, David Prescott and I discussed what they needed from me. And really what they needed from me in that project was my years doing live action beauty lighting and understanding of three-dimensional where you place lights and the quality of the light and the shape and size of the light. So I helped introduce some shadows. I adjusted some of the brightness, a little bit of the contrast. I'd break up hard parts with tree shadows. I add bounce cards in to add a little more dimensionality. Some of the backgrounds were touch dark. And mind you, like that team did 95% of the lighting. Their work is amazing. They were such a beautiful team to work with. But, I had a few high-end beauty tricks that I knew from being just a cinematographer, and that's all I did, So my contribution was that. And the virtual gaffer, Bobby, was extraordinary. So he didn't need me to come in and help him move lights around. He was already extraordinarily fast, and he already would pre-light a set. Then it would be so well done ahead of time, that I was just doing tweaks, which is really beautiful, and it's a testament to David to be able to pick extraordinary teams. But after that project, they have some features that are coming up, and I think David's a very smart producer, and with the short film he's developing his team, and so he wanted to see how I would work with the team and how interested I was in the digital cinema world. And after that, I was like, I'm all in. This is amazing. This is so fun. Like, I don't have to have like a producer yelling at me that I just ordered 5 18Ks because the scene called for it. I literally, during our first lighting session, started laughing out loud on the Zoom call. They were like, what are you laughing at? I'm like, this is heaven. This is a dream. I can do anything I want with lighting anytime with nobody telling me, no, I can't have that light. And I don't need to get 5 extra crew members because I need condors. And I'm like, this is great. And I was like, this is so fun. And they laughed. We're just like, this is great. And then they offered me the Unreal Engine Fellowship that Epic was doing. We were working so closely with them. They were kind enough to, see my enthusiasm and my joy in it. And they offered me to come in and take 5 weeks off, and gave me the stipend. So I had a couple commercials that I called my buddies and was like, hey, I've this once in a lifetime opportunity get in the fellowship. That fellowship is so hard to get into. It's like if only like 400 people have been through it in the entire industry. So, and I love learning, and I really wanted to learn Unreal Engine. I knew that to be a cinematographer in the space, the linchpin of making things look good, you really need to understand Unreal Engine. And that's one of the things I've said with you is, I brought several cinematographers to your CG Pro classes because, not everybody can, be in that cohort that, Unreal Engine, Epic Games will let you into the pearly gates and the incredible training. You guys are the ones who really train where it's like, hey, I've got $2,000 in 8 weeks, 8 weekends where I can come and learn, and you do a really quality job of training people. And cinematographers and gaffers working in that lighting space and working with Unreal really need to get trained up on it. I need as a cinematographer, I need to be able to get the set before I show up on set. I need to see the virtual set weeks before. I need to be able to load it up on Unreal Engine. I need to be able to do my virtual tech scout, take some screen grabs and be like, hey, the cave looks great this way, but I'm going to turn the camera like that for the reverses, and there's nothing there but a concrete wall. I need the cave to be over here too, and I need the cave to have a side wall over here so I can shoot that way, and here's a photo of the props. The art department person changed props and they didn't tell you, so those tables that are blue need to be green and they need to be wicker, and here's a still of that. Go create that asset that'll match our physical prop. Oh, hey, this thing looks terrible during daylight like that. Let's add a bunch of clouds. Let's add a little atmospheric mist. I want the sun to be at the 10 o'clock position, not the 3 p.m. position for our filming. And then the nighttime scene, I need more background lights. Let's add lights in those. And those are the kind of things that a cinematographer needs to know how to operate Unreal on a basic level. It's not a lot to be able to just turn the Unreal Engine on, load up the scene, and then tool around with your, WASD keys and pick a spot. That's something you can learn in 2 hours with a friend, and a cinematographer needs to be able to do that. But then also to have the language of how Unreal Engine describes things, it helps a lot if you're able to realize you're dealing with a reflection issue on a model versus a lighting issue, and as a cinematographer untrained in Unreal, you're going to miss a lot. You're not going to be, your hands are tied, at least one hand's tied behind your back if you haven't been able to load up the set before walking to set.
Right.
Yeah. So,
it really helps, like save a lot of time once you get to set because you've already prepared yourself. You've also been able to explore opportunities before you get to set and understand some of the things that are going to be possible that you maybe wouldn't have found till you got on set, but now you know that they exist. And so just being a lot more prepared, more creative, more be able to integrate between the two, which is between visual effects people and filmmakers, which has always been a bit of a disconnect. So this being able to be fluent or at least proficient in Unreal as a filmmaker, which before it was kind of inaccessible because you'd have to spend a couple of years learning Maya or something to be able to tool around in 3D. Now you can actually jump in. What you're saying is you can jump in with relatively little training and have it really, really improve your workflow.
I do continuing education always, as a cinematographer, new cameras, new lighting techniques, new, so the American Cinematography does, classes for cinematography that are, $1,000 to $3,000 with industry leading experts, and it's like, thank God they do that so that there's some form of access to that knowledge in a cogent presented way, and you guys do a great job with that. You put together a program where, people can just show up on Sunday mornings and, and on 8 consecutive weeks, have a Tuesday night and have a Sunday morning class. And by the end of 8 weeks, you've gone from knowing nothing about virtual production to really having a good overview of it, being functional for virtual tech scouting, rudimentary language to talk lighting with your lighting riggers, and see the workflow and know what you need to ask as a cinematographer going into a virtual production shoot. Who's my Unreal artist? How soon can I see their work? What other work have they done? Who's my Unreal wall tech? What else? What other shows have they worked on? It's very interesting, and it's a daunting field because if you're talking specifically working on a video wall with Unreal Engine running and capturing a live actor in front of that, you have a lot of moving parts, and you have a team that is outside of a normal cinematographer's realm of phone calls, and thanks to that Unreal Fellowship, I met, my cohort was 70 industry professionals that were amazing. They were so talented. It was so exciting being put into a group, and, you make your own animated piece. And coming out of that, they not only gave me the knowledge, Epic Games not only gave me the knowledge on how to use Unreal Engine, they gave me a network. Like they just jump started my career, because now I have a Houdini expert who's a good friend of mine now. I have a Unreal expert who I hire as a troubleshooter. A lot of virtual productions will just, well, we have this slot and that slot. When I work on a virtual production, I'm like, you need to send a check for $1,000 to this buddy of mine, and he's going to be our lifeline caller. Like, what? Why are we doing that? It's like, trust me, it lives overseas. He's going to wake up within 20 minutes of a text, and he's going to answer whatever problem we have that we don't know we're going to have, and he's going to solve it. And people are like, I'm like, look, I'm not taking the job unless you hire my guy. And they're like, okay. And every job, 3 phone calls. And it's like, yeah, we rebuilt this wrong. The config file from the very beginning was built wrong by an artist. And now I can rebuild it. It's going to take me 3 hours, but this is why it's crashing on your wall. And you didn't find out till 2 days before the show. And everybody's freaking out and pulling their hair. And I'm like, you need the guy who's busy doing this stuff, who can't come on set every day and be there for 12 hours, but he's got the answer to why is this problem happening. So, like, I've got a network that makes me a much better cinematographer on live action productions with video walls, because I know who to call when something's not working. When it comes to video walls, it's like Millennium Falcon technology. It's repurposed video wall jumbotron screens that are now being used for virtual production. It's broadcast tracking for motion graphics that's now being repurposed for tracking a camera, talking to a virtual camera in Unreal Engine. It's a video game engine that's designed for first-person shooter games that's now being repurposed as a virtual film set tool. None of these items were originally a film set item. So none of these have the advantage of integrated manufacturing. None of them have integrated personnel. The person who knows how to run the servers for the video wall has no idea a lot of times what's happening under the hood with Unreal Engine 4. An Unreal Engine doesn't know what's happening with the live motion camera. These tools are still in their, infancy. They're getting there, but you need technicians who really understand things and are really, you want the guy who does nothing but cinematography running your cinematography. You want the guy who does nothing but Unreal Engine really running your Unreal Engine on set. You want the video wall tech who, that's my job. I just do video walls. It's a field where some budgets try and get generalists to kind of sneak by. And it's, nowadays in filmmaking and live action, the cameras are so good, the lighting is so good, DaVinci Resolve is so good, mid-level and beginner level players can make big mistakes and correct them easily, or be able to get good looks out of mediocre footage, right? You can shoot with really kind of not so great lighting, but in post they can use power windows and you can fix it, right? That's a very mature, very late game version of cinematography. And that's great. I love that those tools are there. I love that people can make mistakes on set and be corrected in post. Virtual production is at the very beginning of its stage, and it is absolutely crucial that you get the right team, and it's absolutely crucial that you do the right work in pre-production. Everything happens in pre-production when it comes to virtual production. You have to have it all dialed in, know what you're shooting, know the artist, know the time scales. And then when you walk on set, that's the final step in the process. And I think some of our filmmakers were so used to being, well, the film set is the first part of the process. Then it's handed to post and the artists and the cleanup and the editors and the colorists. Now when I go into light of a video wall, I am live color grading. Whereas usually the colorist is doing a bunch of the color grading. I now have an Unreal Engine set that might have a fiery sci-fi planet with, pinks and hues. We're no longer in a color palette of, tungsten to daylight. It's now a color palette of, RGB. So my lighting units need to be RGB to be able to replicate the light that's coming from the wall. So my tools are much more demanding, and the quality of the lighting that I'm doing on the person to make the visual effects sell, you have to get the angles right. You have to get the quality of the light to match. You have to get the cues of what's happening on the screen behind matching what's happening with the live action lights on the actor. So it's very technically demanding, and it goes, the work, you save yourself a lot of problems on a virtual production set by being really good at pre-production,
I'd love to, excuse me, I'd love to ask you a bit about the lighting. Since you mentioned that, particularly to do with LED walls, because I know that a lot of people have a perception that once you've got the LED wall, that's you've got your lighting for free and you're done. And I know that that's not the case, and I'd love to hear your take on that, because obviously that's where you grew up in lighting. Lighting extremely well. I know lighting has evolved a lot during your career as well into this RGB DMX position that it's in now, with LEDs as opposed to crazy hot big giant bulbs. But this idea of you're speaking of being able to get it, needing to get it right on stage, and how much in your experience do you get from the wall, and does it depend on the consistency of the wall, the orientation of the panels, the quality of the panels? Do you need extra lights? I know you do, but
yeah,
I'd love to hear your take on that.
Well, yeah, I'll speak to the, how much, let's codify what lighting comes from the wall. So one of the hardest things to do in special effects, in selling a virtual environment being combined with a live action environment, the wall does a very important part of selling it. And that is subtle changes in light, in the reflective quality of the skin and the metal objects and the reflective objects worn on the person or in the window of the cars around, right? So where on a green screen shoot, where I have to put a person and they're driving and they're going to put trees behind it, I have to work really hard using flags and lights and soft lights, hard lights. I've built lighting rigs where lights are on a pivot point, and I got a 20-foot piece of speed rail that I'm spinning around, and it has two lights that are just doing the street light simulator coming over the person, right? So I had in the past have gone to great lengths to do very subtle lighting cues on the face, and that's what separates the amateurs from the stone cold professionals in selling lighting for visual effects. The wall will give me a lot of that. The Mandalorian, the wall, he's in a metal reflective suit, one of the most nightmarish concepts to film with a green screen, because you just get green screen reflection
everywhere.
So what a nightmare. So to give it a video wall and to have all the reflections in his suit playing as they should, that's amazing. So soft lighting, it'll give you some gentle soft lighting. It will give you environmental lighting, right? So I have to work a lot less with gag lighting on video walls than I used to on a green screen. So great for that. It will not do hard lighting. It will not do lighting that doesn't originate from outside of the wall behind them. So the light only comes from either the side panels or the back panel, and
Yep.
unless you're working on a really, really high end stage that has a video wall topper, the average video wall stage is, 20 to 35,000 a day. The stages that have the video wall overhead, that's the $90,000 a day soundstage, video
Yep.
wall stage. So the thing that you need to know if you're going into lighting a virtual set is you need some RGB soft lights and you need some RGB hard lights, and you need to be able to get them in a 360-degree area around your subject so that it can give the feeling of coming from the direction that the video wall is showing. It doesn't actually have to be the actual direction. It just needs to be perceived as coming from that direction, so.
Yep.
And like sometimes you'll have a candle in the background and like it's flickering and doing a thing, and it would never actually read on your face here, but because it's so visually present in the scene or the torch, you put another light way over here closer just out of screen and have it kick a little bit of yellow into a shadow side from the key. Man, the second you see that and that, your brain just stitches it all together. So like, but the light isn't coming from here, it's coming from back behind them, but like your eye sees it and you see something here. And so, the magic, it's the night they remember, it's not the night they actually lit.
Right.
So, but yeah, you need hard light, and any type of hard light supposedly emanating from your video wall will only shine soft light, and it'll fall off pretty quick. So, the further away you get from the wall, you're back to needing to do all of the lighting,
Yeah, that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and speaking of that, I think there's a lot of people, especially from the visual effects community, that have spent more of their time in kind of a disconnected environment, not on stage. No, VFX supervisors and CG supervisors sometimes get to go on set, but with virtual production, more people are getting to go on set and have interaction. But for people who haven't, I've been lucky in my time to get to spend quite a lot of time on set, and I've learned a lot from being around cinematographers and about how they approach camera positioning and lens choice and lighting choices and those kinds of things. But for someone who hasn't had that luxury, do you have any kind of advice that you would give someone about learning about cinematography? I guess because it's useful for visual effects artists and independent filmmakers.
Yeah. You're one of the people who's taught me, always hit the fundamentals,
Mm.
so um, focus. The first thing is for learning lighting, start by being a study of the lighting you encounter out in the world. And when you see something that you like, you're with a friend, you're having a sandwich down on Larchmont, and then all of a sudden you're like, man, he looks really well lit right now. Look at what lights are creating that, and look at what qualities and what angles are creating that lighting. So for in that instance, with the sandwich shop, I was like, oh, I'm in a dark kind of cave with a few little pin lights that do just enough to create a little hair light, and the massive 40-foot by 40-foot window in the front that had a little frosting on it was creating this extraordinary Rembrandt lighting on the scene. And I'm like, I could recreate that with a 20-foot by 20-foot bleached muslin and a really powerful light banging through it. And it would create this incredibly soft diffuse, but very wide. So the wrap on the light looks amazing, and or like, oh, hey, I have a friend in Palm Springs, and like, my dog was sitting at the edge of the pool, and I was like, oh my God, this is like the best lighting setup I have ever seen in my life. What's happening? And it was like hard sunlight hitting off of a mirrored glass wall, creating a back kick. The back kick splashed into the pool. The pool waves created a wave effect. So I literally had one light, one reflector, and then a second reflector, and I had the perfect lighting setup. And I've recreated that lighting setup on film sets now, where it's just like big, powerful light, that and that kick, and people are like, where did you get that? And was like, Mother Nature handed it to me, just happenstance, So pay attention to the directionality and the quality of the lights. Is it hard light? Is it soft light? What angle? How would I replicate that? What units would replicate that on set? And our sensors on our cameras are so delicate now. We can shoot at 800 ASA. Some of the cameras can shoot at 5,000 ASA. If you really need to like dig into, units being able to do things. And where I used to have a 20K to get a hard light feeling, I can do that with a 2K LED now. So the barrier to entry is much lower. You can get a much cheaper lighting kit and have the same results that, back when we were shooting ASA 50, and doing like, from dusk till dawn, you're like 18K, 5K, 4 feet from his head with a thing, an actor going like this, car scene,
melting their face.
Like, I can't even freaking drive the car. I'm going to crash this thing, like, okay, we'll put another layer of diffusion, Yeah, the tools are so much more forgiving now,
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the next thing I would say is, sign up for some of our courses. We teach a course in cinematography that's a 2-day course that we've been getting a lot of positive feedback, and, have students who call up now, and, do something that gets somebody to teach you the fundamentals, and, they at least give you an overview. So then as you start punching in, you can go deeper, but like get the overview first.
Right.
And there's YouTube videos that are good for lighting, and there's there's a lot of resources out there that have like 10-minute tutorials,
Yeah, I guess there's nothing like experience and being able to be on set, like we discussed, being there in that environment. You're going to learn a ton, but yeah, being able to benefit from some of the online education that's there. And this wasn't meant to be a shameless plug, but shameless plug. Yes, we're going to redo the lighting and cinematography workshop coming up very early this year, and we're going to do an extended version of that into Q1. Really, really looking forward to working with you on that again.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to teach. So when you guys asked me to teach a masterclass in lighting, it was like, sure, I'll try. I don't know, it's like, am I repeating rehash stuff or this? But like, it made me a better cinematographer to codify it in my head and then be able to express it. There's a ton of things I was doing kind of instinctively and just naturally that I picked up, but like to explain that process to somebody else made me really, re-examine my process. And it also made me a little more limber, just going through the process of teaching, making sure I was being thorough on goalpost to goalpost. Here's what you really needed to do. It reminded me to like, not just play the hits when I was on set, like experiment a little bit, or like, oh, you know what, I this could work and it's quick and easy, but like, it's a little harder, but it actually looks a little better if I do this other strategy. And you know what, we're here to make it look really good, not just, get a paycheck,
Right.
So, yeah, those classes really help. Like, yeah, definitely, if you can, especially for what we're doing, because we're offering something that's really cool, where it's like, you want to learn how to light in Unreal Engine, we'll teach you how to light, and then we'll teach you how to translate that lighting into Unreal Engine. We'll give you some composition ideas and all of that. There's very few places where you can get, that kind of knowledge that quickly. It was just like, yeah.
Amazing to work with you on that, because not only do you have all of that experience from the real world, you're able to translate it in. You have the understanding of being able to translate it into the Unreal Engine and into the CG world, which I think is where a lot of us from the CG world have have not had as much of that influence. We've lit a lot of things, but
Yeah.
having that experience of real world lighting and bringing that into this space, I think, even though we're talking about Lumen and getting all of the indirect stuff for free or whatever, it's still, you're making conscious choices about what light you're keeping or what light you're adding. That idea of mentioned flags, which probably a lot of people will know what they are. Some
Yeah.
people don't know the fact that there's all this stuff going on set where you're subtracting light, you're taking light away and masking it off, and those classic movies that you see where just the eyes are lit and the rest of it's shadowed. Like, you think,
Mm-hmm.
wow, that was lucky, until you meet a gaffer and you realize that they put some very intentional things in the way to create that
Yeah.
intentionally, consciously. And I think that's the sort of magic of it to me, is knowing that there's somebody making those choices and intentionally.
Yeah, it's amazing how people talk about lighting, but the masters know that it's lighting and shadow,
Yeah.
right? Like, yeah, Deacon's master of the shadow, right? So where do I want the shadows in my scene as much as where do I want the lights in my scene? And there lighting is a daunting thing to learn. I still approach every lighting setup when I walk on set, I come in with a beginner's mindset. I just, it's humbling. Like, that I'm good, but like there's always something to learn. Don't just come in. And the guys who are like, oh, I'm so good, all I do, they're the dudes who were great for a time period, but then they know they didn't stay up with the gear and they didn't stay up with the, fashion. Lighting is fashionable. And there are things
Mm.
that come in and out of fashion. And there's technologies that require a certain lighting style that then are not required anymore, and you can be aggressive and cutting edge. Great example is when we went over to the digital revolution. Soft light, very few edge lights. The digital cameras in 2000 didn't have very much dynamic range like film did, so you couldn't light Pulp Fiction with an 18K blasting in window and creating a cool edge here and a fill light. You can't do that digital. And in 2002, you'd have to do a soft Kino flow without diffusion and a Kino flow with heavy diffusion to get that same look without it blowing out and looking terrible. So the sensors drove the lighting for a while, which is a terrible thing to have happen. But you just work with the tools you're given and you do the lighting that's required for the make it look good. Do whatever it takes, make the thing look good. And then when camera sensors evolved, some of those gaffers just kept doing that schlocky stuff. And we were all tired of looking at soft lighting after a while. When they invented the Kino flow and it came out, it was amazing. Like, oh, spaceships look like spaceships and this futuristic soft lighting, and like, oh, it's great. And then it was like, oh, everything's soft. And now you're like, there's no definition here. And then a hard edge became edgy. So you
Mm.
see lighting styles come in fashion and go out of fashion. They come back in fashion. And you got to know where you are. You got to know what set
Mm.
you're on. Am I on beauty lighting, or am I on like glamour lighting, or am I on natural, just happen to walk into this beauty lighting that's beautiful, like, yeah. So, but there's no, there's no way to do it but to just kind of pound through 20 years of being on set to really get good at the process. Some of the process of the lighting is, where's your key light? Just turn everything else off. Get all of these lights off. Let me just see my key light. Let me move that key light around until it looks great. And now I've got my heavy lifting done. Turn off the key light. What angle do I want the fill light to do? Do I want it to be horror, underlit a little? Do I want it to be side light, simulating a window here that you can't see? So I'm using a light to create an architectural element. Do I want that to just be a backlight? And do I want this to be dark shadow? Yeah, I want a dark shadow here because color's in. So now I'm going to add a fill color from the LED light. And to see color on a face, you need to first put a shadow on the face. And then when the shadow's there, then the color will show. So our class will teach things like that. And these are like, the how-tos as much as, why are you doing stuff? And then you can go into the nuances of a million different lighting setups. But if you have the fundamentals of what's your approach to your lighting setup, how do you mentally organize it, and, what are you trying to do? One of the other things we do a lot with shadows is, as people are walking on virtual sets and you have like columns or beams in your virtual set, have them walk under a shadow, and that little shadow just sells the environment. Even though you're not seeing the beam over their head, you're suggesting it with shadow. So you're not only doing lighting, you're doing architectural tie-ins. You're making the world exist outside of the box of the frame.
Right. Yeah, and it's all in service of the story, right? You're
Yes.
working with a director to make sure that you're sticking to telling a story with these tools. That's the point of using these conscious decisions, is to evoke a feeling, or
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. One of the things I say in our class is, the lighting is one of the lead characters in the movie that has no dialogue,
Yeah.
but you're getting emotions from it. You're getting information from it. You're seeing, you're concealing, you're getting time of day, you're getting the emotional content. Different colors will have different emotional impacts on people. So in my lighting designs, I've read deep on, the emotional content of color theory. Different colors evoke different emotions from us. So it's like, cleverly hiding little elements of those kind of colors in your setup really do a lot to, drive the narrative of the story forward, bring that emotional content alive, much like the music does. The music does a lot
Yeah.
of emotional lifting too, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. I love those little tests they do where they take the last scene in Star Wars or whatever, they take the music out and it just all of a sudden doesn't work at all.
It's like, yeah, it's really interesting. Yeah. Or
Yeah.
like when I'm on set and I'm adding a little special light in the closet, and the director's like, where's that light coming from? It's like, it's coming from the same place the scary music is coming from.
Right. That's the art.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a point where the science can get in the way and
Yeah.
you have to employ the art.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
We have one question that
Yes.
came in. Somebody asked, what is the best way for a DP to find virtual production jobs or work?
That's a great question. The first place that all of your jobs come from as a cinematographer is you talking about what you're doing. So your jobs as a cinematographer come from your community of friends and coworkers who know you do good work, right? That's where every job you ever get is going to come from. So your conversation creates your reality when it comes to jobs. So when I started doing virtual cinematography, I started sharing posts on my social media feeds about like, oh, look at this cool virtual lighting thing. Oh, look at this cool still from this. This is a fake wall, and I would do a little breakdown. Or just in person. Hey, what are you doing this week? Oh, I'm doing this really interesting thing. Like I'm being working on an animated short film, and people are like, I thought you were, doing cinematography. I was like, I am. I'm just doing an animation project right now, And so people were like, oh, Wolfie's doing that kind of work now, And then because I was making those posts, a guy I worked with for 25 years, had no idea I was doing it. And I made a post. I was like, hey, I'm working on this virtual production. He's like, dude, we've been looking for 3 months for somebody who knew Unreal Engine. We don't know anybody. We got this client that wants to do this thing with Walmart. Do you know anybody? And I was like, as a matter of fact, I do, Ed. Expert in Unreal Engine, and I've been talking to him. So yeah, and then we had you come in and do a budget bid, and it was like you were just absolutely the right guy to bring in, and they were so happy. So and that's how I knew you did it. So until I started talking about the fact that I was doing virtual production, my network that was ready with jobs waiting to hire me didn't know to call me, because why would they? Because I hadn't been doing it before, right? And
Yeah.
then when you're doing your jobs, find what pay attention to your NDAs, but ask your producers like, Can I take a photo not looking at the talent of the wall? And can I, after the commercial is out, can I put a thing that shows that? And they're like, oh yeah, after the commercial's out, no problem. Don't post anything before. Or they'll be like, no, this is like proprietary on this wall, but you can take a photo of the set, but just look at the lights. That's fine, you know. But being able to post those things, showing you doing the work, showing you on the set, you know, the more people around you know what you're doing, the more you'll get that work. So that's the first step. The second step is do your homework. Don't sell yourself until you can actually do the job. So, you know, start taking classes, you know, take a CG Pro class, you know, look at free training classes on Epic Games, you know, seek out people that are working in the space that are friends of yours. Take them to lunch, ask them what they learned, ask them about their nightmare shoots that they're not going to hear on Facebook. Be like, so tell me about the problems, tell me about the crash and burns. You know, I find that's a really good question because, you know, a friend on set away from everybody will tell you, oh, I was on this job and this guy did this and it totally screwed the whole thing up and we had to go reshoot. And like, you're like, oh, wow, I wouldn't have thought of that. You know, so start probing your network, you know, steal your Promethean fire from the people around you who will share their information with you. Be good giving in game in return. Share your information back. It's a two-way street. You know, there's teams always win, you know, like the one person with their little piece of figured out knowledge that they hold dearly that they don't share with other people. They never last in the industry. We're in a collaborative industry. There's all the jobs. People are always going to work. You know, like don't come at it with that scarcity mindset. Come at the learning with an abundance mindset. And the more you give away, the more comes back at you, you know. So, you know, as you learn things, help your friends out and that kind of thing. I think that would be the next step. And then the third step is find somebody who's got a green screen, you know, and then a Vive tracker that's just, you know, messing around in their garage and go over and light it for them and, you know, show up on set, you know, hey, you got your virtual production buddies that are doing a test. Hey, I'm not working that day. I'm going to go down and I'm going to like, you know, just be on set. And then you're useful because you're moving lights and you help make it look better because you're a cinematographer. And, you know, oh, wow, that helped. It actually was just a lighting issue and we were trying to fix it in the background. You know, you're like, yeah, like go and be helpful, you know, and go and hang out in the play spaces, you know, like, you know, Jed Alano is got a really cool space he's building in Pasadena, you know, and he's open to people coming through and like, you know, he prototypes things and, you know, like, you know, so there's all these different places where you can kind of, you know, start getting access to the system, you know.
Awesome. Yeah, great. I mean, there was a lot of really great advice for life in general mixed in there. I think so much of this stuff is like,
Don't
you
be a
know,
dick.
metaphorical. Right. Yeah. Good life advice. Don't be a dick.
Yeah.
But that absolutely applies here. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing that
Yeah.
advice. I'm sure a lot of people are very curious about what virtual production is. Hopefully, this did a good job of demystifying that a little bit, and I know lots of people are interested in getting into it and how. And there's some great advice there. Thank you
Yeah.
so much, Wolfie, for joining us and sharing your time and your wisdom and experience with
Oh,
everybody.
absolutely a pleasure. And like only have the knowledge I have from the generosity of all the beautiful people who've taught me throughout the years. You know, like, you know, I rolled into town in 95, you know, with a pair of gloves and a mat knife and a crescent wrench and started my journey into film set lighting, knowing next to nothing, you know. So it's like we all come from humble beginnings, you know. So yeah, happy to share it, you know.
Is there any places that people can follow you and see what you're doing?
Yeah, yeah, I'm on Instagram as Wolfie Dreams. My website is wolfiedop.com, and that's WOLFIE DOP.com. That's a great place to get a hold of me if you want to, like, anybody has questions or that. And yeah, those are pretty much my web presence. I'm on LinkedIn as well. Erik Wolfie Wolford, cinematographer.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully there's a bunch of people out there that will follow you and learn from you and hire you. And yeah, been
Yeah.
a super, super awesome conversation. I was really looking forward to this.
Oh
So
yeah, and
thank you.
catch us supposedly in January at Sundance if that's still going to be happening. You know, if Sundance is still
Yeah.
going on. Yeah, so we'll be doing some live demos with Ed and Jackie at Sundance. You know, and that should be neat. So
Yeah, really looking forward to that. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, and a couple of classes coming up in early next year.
yeah. If
Another
you're
shameless plug.
yeah, no, seriously, if people are interested in in watching a video like this, like really, you know, the classes seem expensive. You know, you're like, ooh, how many? But it's priceless, like priceless, useful knowledge. You know, you can't you if you're going to be working in a virtual production environment, you can't blow a $50,000 day on a video wall because you just missed one little piece of data. You know, you got to spend the money to get to be a quality person so that when you get the job, you're able to do the job. And there's so much in virtual production which you don't know. It's that fourth quadrant. You know, it's like you know what you don't know and you know what you know, but it's that what you don't know, and virtual production will eat you alive. don't don't just wing it in that quadrant. Go shine a flashlight into that dark corner, and that's done with online classes. You know, that's the cheapest and fastest way to get good. You know, you look at like Art Lazaro, man, like starts out not knowing anything about Unreal Engine, and then he's like coming out with this 3 minute piece after 8 weeks where he's dipped into Maya, taught himself bits of Maya, and it's this stunningly gorgeous model in this landscape. You know, there's just, you know, the classes will just turbo boost your talent. You know, it's amazing watching some of the people like Jonathan Paul with his piece, like coming in
Yeah.
knowing nothing, but he's just a visual performance artist and all that, you know, a sculptor. And like just in 8 weeks has this amazing concept and is like got his little character flying through a cyberpunk city, you know, like the classes are really fun, you know, like they're enjoyable in the process. But then you know, you come out of it and you really are, you know, it's like spending a year in the trenches at a video game shop doing stuff, you know, you know, it really helps.
I very much enjoy them too, and it's amazing to see the things that people are able to accomplish. And really, really cool that we're in this time where people can do that without spending years and years to acquire. It's almost annoying because I had to do that, but it's great that the people are able to jump in and with
Yeah.
much less barrier be able to get in and be creative. I think this is a really, really unique time that we're in, a very exciting one.
Yeah, I agree. Awesome.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Well,
everybody.
thank you.
Have a good rest of your Christmas and holidays and all of that. And we'll see you in the new year.
Thank you very much, Wolfie. Appreciate it. Yeah, and thank you to all the listeners. Really appreciate you guys tuning in. Like and subscribe to follow more of what we're doing. We'll have another one of these in a couple of weeks. Follow us at becomecgpro.com to hear more about classes and stuff. And yeah, thank you.